The triceps make up roughly 2/3 of the entire upper arm. So if you want to develop more thickness, shape, and overall size to the arms, this is not a muscle group that you want to neglect. Now, when I see people with lagging triceps, or arms in general, the majority of the time I can trace it back to one specific area of their training that they're completely neglecting, and that is subjecting the triceps to heavy weights. You see, for a muscle group that's often thought of as a smaller body part or an accessory or afterthought when building the physique, the triceps are an extremely strong muscle group for the upper body, and most people with lagging arms are not properly loading the triceps when trying to build more muscle. You'll often see guys in the gym doing things like tricep kickbacks with 15 to 20 pounds, body weight dips for high reps, and just basic tricep extensions to all different angles, but again, with not very much weight. Now don't get me wrong, these movements all have their place in training, and they're not useless. But to get the most out of your tricep training, you want to place them under heavy loads in addition to these movements. Think about it. No one built massive legs just doing pump sets of leg extensions. That's part of it, yes, but they did so through years of progressive overload on squats, leg presses, hack squats, and other compound movements. And the reason most people neglect heavy training for the triceps comes down to the concerns over the health of the elbow, or just assuming that compound lifts checks off the box of heavy training. And today, I'm going to address both of these and explain how you can get more out of your tricep training right now. The first tip for elbow safety and longevity, you should always place the heavy tricep extension movements, especially the ones with free weights, later in the session. The first movement should always be a higher rep movement that's low stress on the elbows, such as the basic cable press down. For years, I've always done basic tricep press downs, whether that's one arm, two arm, V-bar, or rope press downs first in the session. And I've been known to use some heavy weights on skull crushers and overhead extensions. And doing this higher rep cable work first, it serves to lubricate the elbow joint, get the synovial fluid moving, and creates a massive pump in the triceps. When guys usually complain about elbow pain or heavy skull crushers or overhead extensions, they almost always attempt to do them first in the session. And the elbows are just not ready for that kind of weight. But warming up the triceps with cables and getting a massive pump, you not only get the joints ready for heavy loading, but you also get the triceps ready by going into the movement with lots of blood in the muscle. This creates a much better environment for mind-muscle connection. Now, when you move on to something like skull crushers, you can load up a much heavier weight and generally much less discomfort at the elbow. And the skull crusher itself is one of the best isolation movements for loading the triceps. We're going to get into compound lifts in a minute, but you should always aim to incorporate at least one tricep extension or isolation movement that can be loaded heavily, provided that you could do so pain-free. This not only subjects the triceps to heavy weights like compounds would, but it's also ensuring that when you complete the set, it's the triceps that are failing under the load, and not the bigger, stronger muscles like the pecs and the delts. That's one major drawback when using compound lifts that not many people understand. They assume that if you do a close grip bench and that you hit failure, that basically the triceps are a smaller muscle group, so those are the muscles that are failing. They're basically the weak link, and using this movement is sufficient for bigger arms. But to really get the most out of your compound lifts for the smaller muscle groups, you want to do one of two things, or even include both, and that is either supersetting your isolation movements with a compound movement, skull crushers, superset with close grip bench, one of my personal favorites, or taking your heavy compound movement like dips or close grip press and placing it all the way at the end of your training session after exhausting the triceps through isolation exercises. Going into these movements in a pre-fatigue state for a body part like the tricep ensures that the triceps are what's failing under the load. And if you're having trouble developing your arms on movements like dips or close grip bench, I highly recommend you move them to the last exercise of the day and watch how much more you get out of the movement for the triceps themselves. But in general, if you're looking to build bigger arms, and we're talking the triceps specifically, I highly recommend doing your training in this order. First, higher rep press downs for the first exercise of the session. Then move on to the bulk of your mass building exercises, including skull crushers, overhead extensions, French presses, etc. And then finally, if you're incorporating compound lifts into the routine as well, finish off the session with them. And if you want the exact routines that I personally use, as well as recommend for guys who are looking to build mass using proven old school bodybuilding training methods, I highly recommend you check out my 5-day old school mass gain program in the description below. And as always, if you want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.